Mary Hunter's mysterious disappearance on September 1st, 1996, from Burlington, Washington, continues to baffle investigators and haunt those who knew her. Her case remains one of the most perplexing in the Pacific Northwest, characterized by conflicting accounts, circumstantial evidence, and tragic consequences. Mary and her husband, Daryl Hunter, embarked on what was supposed to be a routine outing, a trip to the Cascade Mall and target shooting in rural Skagit County with Mary's dog. However, their plans took an ominous turn when Mary encountered an unidentified man at the mall. She introduced him to Derk as a former high school classmate named Tony or Todd. Derk claimed he left Mary and the man standing by their car in the parking lot while he used the restroom. Upon his return, both Mary and her dog were gone. Derk reportedly searched for 5 hours before leaving. He returned the next day and found Mary's dog, which appeared slightly injured, as if it had fallen from a vehicle. Mary vanished with an orange backpack containing 2 Smith & Wesson firearms, a .357 Magnum and a 9mm semi-automatic. Despite her disappearance, she took none of her personal belongings, such as credit cards, clothes, or money. Her bank account, which contained a significant sum, remained untouched. Derk's actions following Mary's disappearance raised eyebrows. He claimed she was withdrawing money from ATMs, but security footage revealed he was the one using her ATM card. Additionally, he removed her name from his insurance policies and attempted to sell their jointly owned vehicles. He eventually filed for divorce in 1997, only to withdraw the filing 3 months later. Mary and Derk's marriage had its challenges. Derk, a Navy officer, was reportedly possessive and controlling. The couple lived on the Naval Air Station at Whidbey Island with their teenage son, while their 15-year-old daughter had run away a year earlier. These tensions painted a picture of a strained household, though it remains unclear how they directly related to Mary's disappearance. Following Mary's vanishing, Derk's life unraveled. He retired from the Navy in 1998, suffering from depression, alcoholism, and post-traumatic stress disorder. He experienced fainting spells and episodes of amnesia, which may have compounded his deteriorating mental health. On September 1st, 2003, 7 years to the day after Mary disappeared, Derk took his own life in his parents' Florida home. He left behind several notes, one of which claimed Mary had committed suicide and he had concealed her body at her request. However, investigators found no evidence to support this claim and remained skeptical of Derk's account. Authorities have long suspected foul play in Mary's disappearance. They believe Derk may have been involved but lack sufficient evidence to charge him. His controlling behavior and the discrepancies in his accounts raised suspicion, yet nothing concrete tied him to Mary's presumed demise. The identity of the mysterious man Mary introduced as Tony or Todd also remains unknown. Whether he was truly a former classmate or a fabrication to obscure the truth is another unanswered question in this case. Mary Hunter's case remains unsolved. Lenoria Jones, a young girl from Tacoma, Washington, vanished on July 20th, 1995, under mysterious circumstances, and her case remains unsolved to this day. She was last seen with her great-aunt Berlin Williams in the Hilltop neighborhood of Tacoma, where they lived in the 1900 block of South Sheridan Avenue. At the time of her disappearance, Berlin Williams had legal custody of Lenoria and was in the process of adopting her. Lenoria's mother, who had already lost legal rights to her daughter, lived in Arkansas and had no ongoing relationship with Lenoria. The day Lenoria disappeared, she was reportedly with Berlin at the Target store on South 23rd Street in Tacoma. According to Williams, Lenoria went missing while inside the store. However, security footage from the store contradicted this account. The video clearly showed Williams entering the store alone, with no sign of Lenoria anywhere in the vicinity. This inconsistency raised suspicions about Williams's version of events. Williams initially called the police to report Lenoria's disappearance at 9:42 a.m. But earlier that morning at 8:47 a.m., she had called her daughter and admitted she didn't know where Lenoria was. It took her almost an hour to contact authorities, which raised further questions about the timeline and Williams's involvement in the situation. In the aftermath of Lenoria's disappearance, Williams's statements to the authorities began to shift. First, she claimed Lenoria had wandered away from their home. Then she suggested that the child had been abducted from the Target parking lot. Later, she mentioned two unidentified African-American men who allegedly kidnapped Lenoria near their home on South Sheridan Avenue. In another variation, Williams stated that Lenoria was alive and safe, living in an undisclosed location. Her changing stories were troubling to investigators. Williams's contradictory accounts made it difficult for authorities to piece together what had truly happened. Additionally, Lenoria's mother reported that she had tried to speak with her daughter 2 days prior to the disappearance, but Williams refused to let them talk. This further fueled suspicions about Williams's role in the case. As the investigation progressed, Berlian Williams was placed under house arrest for 4 months due to her lack of cooperation and failure to provide accurate information regarding Lenoria's whereabouts. Her day care center was also shut down by the state. Despite these actions, Williams has never been officially charged in connection with Lenoria's disappearance. Her lawyer maintains that her inconsistent statements were the result of aggressive questioning by law enforcement. In the course of their investigation, authorities ruled out other members of Lenoria's family, most of whom lived in Arkansas, as possible suspects. However, the case remains open, and the circumstances surrounding her disappearance remain unclear. Some officials speculate that foul play may have been involved, while others believe Lenoria might still be alive and living in an unknown location. Another theory that emerged during the investigation was that Lenoria may have died from an accidental overdose of norpinephrine, a tricyclic antidepressant prescribed to her for ADHD. Lenoria had been taking the medication for just a few days before her disappearance. Norpinephrine has serious side effects, including a rash, seizures, and in some cases death, particularly when given to young children. However, no evidence has been found to support the overdose theory, and investigators continue to question whether this could have played a role in her disappearance. The disappearance of Lenoria Jones remains one of Tacoma's most haunting unsolved cases. Though many of her relatives have been ruled out as suspects, Berlian Williams' shifting stories, along with the strange circumstances surrounding Lenoria's last known whereabouts, continue to cast doubt on her involvement in the child's disappearance. Whether foul play was involved, whether Lenoria is still alive, or whether she succumbed to an accidental overdose, the case is still open and no clear answers have emerged. Lenoria's family continues to search for her, holding on to the hope that one day, the truth about what happened to the young girl will be revealed. Wilfred Johnson, a Navy veteran and a beloved member of the Longview, Washington community, vanished without a trace on June 29, 2017. At 11 a.m. that morning, neighbors saw him going about his usual routine, seemingly in good health and spirits. But by the next day, he had disappeared, and his family was left searching for answers. The following day, June 30th, 2017, Wilfred's silver 2007 Honda Accord was discovered abandoned in Gifford-Pinchot National Forest, located east of Cougar, Washington, about 100 miles from his home. The car was found high-centered in a roadside ditch, a striking and unusual location considering Wilfred had no known connection to the forest. The car had been seen there at around 6 p.m. the evening before, and yet there was no sign of Wilfred himself. When authorities arrived to investigate, they found the car in poor condition. The driver's side door was dented, and the window had been smashed, with glass scattered across the seat. Missing from the vehicle were a jacket and jumper cables, but the keys were still in the ignition, suggesting whoever had been driving the car didn't try to fix it after it got stuck or continue their journey. The circumstances seemed peculiar. Why would someone simply leave a car in such an isolated spot? Despite the discovery of his car, there were few clues about Wilfred's whereabouts. His family was certain he wouldn't have been traveling to the National Forest, as he had no ties to the area. He had lived a simple life, enjoying regular walks, local restaurants, and attending his great-grandchildren's sporting events. He was an active man, even in his older years, but his family was adamant that long-distance travel and hiking were not part of his routine. An extensive search of the surrounding area, including the dense woods and rugged terrain of Gifford Pinchot National Forest, failed to turn up any signs of Wilfred. Despite the efforts of authorities and volunteers, there was no trace of him, no footprints, no personal items, and no indication that he had ventured far from the car. Wilfred was well known in his community as a self-sufficient and friendly man. After the death of his wife in 2011, he continued to live independently in the house they had shared. He worked at a paper mill for much of his life and was a proud Navy veteran, having served during World War II. He was also a long-time member of the Abundant Life Church of the Nazarene in nearby Kelso, Washington, where he had made many friends over the years. Although Wilfred was aging, he was in good physical condition for his years. His regular walks and daily activities were a familiar part of his routine, but he wasn't one to stray far from home or take long journeys. The idea that he would drive to a remote area like the Gifford Pinchot National Forest seemed out of character, further adding to the confusion of his disappearance. There was no evidence of foul play in Wilfred's disappearance, but his family couldn't shake the suspicion that something sinister may have happened. They noted that Wilfred often carried a significant amount of cash on him, as he didn't use credit cards. His family believes he may have been robbed by someone who took advantage of his helpful nature. Wilfred was known to assist anyone who appeared to be in need, and his selflessness could have made him an easy target. Additionally, Wilfred didn't carry a cell phone, and since his disappearance, there had been no activity on his bank account, further deepening the mystery. His family remains uncertain if he was in an accident, met someone with ill intentions, or simply became lost in an area he was unfamiliar with. As time passed, the lack of answers surrounding Wilfred's disappearance became even more distressing. Where did he go after his car was abandoned? Why did he drive so far from home? Did someone take advantage of him? Despite thorough searches, interviews with witnesses, and an ongoing investigation, the circumstances surrounding Wilfred Johnson's disappearance remain unclear. Wilfred Johnson's case remains unsolved. Alice Hummel's disappearance in October 1990 remains one of Bellingham, Washington's most unsettling mysteries, entangled in allegations of abuse, deception, and murder. At the time of her vanishing, Alice lived with her husband, Bruce Allen Hummel, and two of their children in a home on Alabama Hill. Their eldest daughter was away at college. The family had a history of teaching in Alaska's remote bush, but by 1990 they had settled in Washington. Just days before her disappearance, Alice's 12-year-old daughter, Shonalyn, confided in her that Bruce had been sexually abusing her since she was a toddler. This admission confirmed what Alice had long suspected. She promised her daughter the abuse would stop and vowed to handle the situation. Yet, shortly afterward, Alice vanished. On October 6, 1990, Shonalyn returned home from school to find her mother gone without a word. Alice had made no mention of leaving, nor did she pack anything. She left behind all her belongings, including her purse, wallet, identification, and medicine. Adding to the mystery, she missed her daughter's birthday, a milestone they had planned to celebrate together by attending a ballet performance. Bruce told their children that Alice had gone to California to find work. He involved Shonalyn in packing her mother's clothes, makeup, and other belongings to send to her. However, Shonalyn later learned Bruce had sold some of Alice's items at a garage sale. Months after Alice's disappearance, her son, Sean, discovered boxes and a suitcase of his mother's belongings hidden in their basement. He also found a note in a secret spot they had used to exchange messages. The note, purportedly written by Alice, appeared to be a suicide letter, yet the handwriting closely resembled Bruce's. In the months that followed, the family received occasional correspondence, including birthday cards and a letter signed in Alice's name, claiming she was involved with another man who didn't want children. Bruce told the children that Alice had moved from California to Texas after getting a promotion. Despite his assurances, Bruce would become enraged if his children checked the mail for more letters from their mother. The abuse of Shonalyn continued. In the years after Alice's disappearance, Bruce remarried and moved to Billings, Montana. In 1993, when Alice's father passed away, her children tried to contact her but were unable to locate her. Finally, in 2001, their eldest daughter, Sharinda, reported her mother missing. By then, suspicion had long surrounded Bruce's version of events. Investigators conducted an exhaustive search of records across the United States and Canada, but found no sign of Alice. When authorities tracked Bruce down in Montana in 2004, he gave yet another story, claiming he had last seen Alice when he dropped her off at the airport for a job interview in California. He said their last conversation took place in 1991. Further investigation revealed a damning detail. Bruce had been collecting Alice's $1,500 monthly disability payments from the Alaska Teachers Retirement System since her disappearance. He forged her signature on checks and letters to continue receiving the benefits, pocketing a total of $276,000. He also admitted to sexually abusing Shonalyn. Bruce's lies unraveled further in 2004 when he fled Montana after leaving behind a chilling letter. In it, he claimed Alice had committed suicide in their bathroom by slashing her wrist. He detailed how he had cleaned the scene, disposed of her body by weighing it down and casting it into Bellingham Bay on a raft, and concealed the truth from their children. Authorities were skeptical of this account. Weather records showed there had been no wind or rough water on the night Bruce claimed to have disposed of Alice's body, and no blood was ever found in the bathroom. They discovered that Bruce had done work on the Holmes Foundation around the time of her disappearance, raising further suspicion. In 2007, Bruce was arrested on federal wire fraud charges for forging Alice's signature to collect her benefits. While in custody, he confessed that Alice had been dead since October 1990. He was sentenced to 27 months in prison. However, he continued to change his story about how she had died, with each version raising more questions than answers. In 2008, Bruce was charged with Alice's murder. At his trial in 2009, a former cellmate testified that Bruce had admitted to poisoning Alice with barbiturates. Despite his denials, he was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 45 years in prison. However, his conviction was overturned on technical grounds in 2012, and he was granted a new trial. Convicted again in 2014, Bruce was sentenced to 26 years in prison. But in 2016, an appellate court ruled there was insufficient evidence to prove premeditation. His conviction was overturned, and he was released, as the law prohibits a third trial after acquittal. To this day, police theorize that Alice confronted Bruce about the abuse, and in response, he killed her and fabricated a series of lies to explain her disappearance. Bruce maintains his innocence and insists he had no role in Alice's death. Her remains have never been found, and she remains a missing person. Sophia Wiz's disappearance remains one of the most heart-wrenching unsolved cases in the United States. On the evening of February 4th, 2003, just hours before her 5th birthday, Sophia was last seen playing with her brother in her bedroom in Kennewick, Washington. Between 8:15 and 9:15 p.m., she left the room, telling her mother, Maria Juarez, that she was heading to the store, which was just 5 blocks away. Maria, assuming Sophia was going to the store with her grandmother's boyfriend, gave her $1 to spend. Sophia was expected to get into the boyfriend's car, but she never did. The boyfriend left without her, and no one saw Sophia leave the house. It wasn't until he returned from the store around 9:45 p.m. and said that Sophia hadn't gone with him that Maria began to worry. By then, she knew something was terribly wrong, and she immediately alerted the authorities. Sophia's disappearance was treated as an abduction from the outset. An Amber Alert was issued, but after 36 hours of intense searching, it was canceled when Sophia was not found. Despite the lack of progress, police continued to hold the belief that she had been abducted. There were no signs of her at the store or anywhere else nearby. Authorities reached out to Sophia's father, who had never met his daughter. He was cooperative but was ruled out as a suspect. Sophia's grandmother's boyfriend was also cleared, though he became a part of the investigation due to his presence in the situation. A 10-year-old relative of Sophia, who lived in the home, said he saw her walking down the driveway just around the time of her disappearance. He claimed she was accompanied by a man wearing black clothing, but this sighting could not be confirmed. Months later, in May 2003, investigators revealed that they were searching for a mid-90s model full-size van. The van was described as being faded orange, with a license plate that included a double J. The driver was described as a Caucasian male, aged between 35 and 40, with a thick blonde beard. A witness recalled seeing the van in the area near the time Sophia vanished, but the connection between the van and the abduction remained unclear. As the investigation continued, new information came to light. In 2021, a witness came forward with a startling claim. The witness stated that they saw a young girl matching Sophia's description walking down the sidewalk on South Washington Street, not far from where Sophia was last seen. The witness reported seeing a person leading the little girl away. A light-colored van, which seemed to be a work-type vehicle used by painters or contractors, was parked nearby. It was a late 1970s or early 1980s full-size panel van with no side windows. The person leading Sophia away appeared to be another child, between 11 and 14 years old. The witness described the child as Hispanic, with short, wavy dark hair and large hands, and said the boy was laughing as Sophia cried. Despite several extensive searches and the release of descriptions of both a potential suspect and the vehicle involved, little evidence has been found. Searchers came across a pair of overalls and a little girl's shoes, but neither were identified as belonging to Sophia. There has been no other trace of her, and as the years pass, the mystery surrounding her disappearance only deepens. Sophia was described by those who knew her as a loving, vivacious child who loved to play with her Barbie dolls and put on makeup. Her favorite food was hamburgers from Burger King. Maria, Sophia's mother, stated that her daughter was shy and would never have gone with a stranger without a fight. She believed Sophia's abductor was someone the child knew and trusted. Sophia's disappearance devastated her family, and despite extensive media coverage, her case remains unsolved. Her mother, Maria, continued to search for Sophia until she passed away from natural causes in January 2009 at the young age of 26. By then, Sophia had been missing for almost 6 years, and the pain of her absence never stopped. In the years that followed, investigators, family, and the community held on to the hope that answers would eventually come. Today, Sophia remains missing and her case is still open. The disappearance of Archer Johnson on April 1st, 1986 from Brooklyn, Washington, is a tale woven with mystery, unanswered questions, and conflicting details that have haunted his family for decades. Archer, a skilled woodsman, bark peeler, and fern picker, vanished during what seemed like an ordinary day, leaving behind a trail of uncertainty and suspicions that linger to this day. The morning began like many others for Archer and his brother, Earl Johnson. They were cutting firewood together, a routine task that took them into the woods near Brooklyn, Washington. After the brothers had loaded their truck with a full cord of wood, they drove to Earl's house, where they unloaded half a cord and went about their day. Archer even stayed for a while to help Earl's girlfriend, Rosa Butoric, feed the cows. Before leaving, Archer mentioned needing $50 for his pickup truck tabs. Earl promised to lend him the money after withdrawing it from the bank. Archer left his brother's house at approximately 11:40 a.m., heading toward Oakville, Washington via Brooklyn Road. About 10 to 15 minutes later, Earl and Butoric left as well, taking the same route. That's when they spotted Archer's truck. It was parked partially along a gravel logging road at the top of Oakville Hill. The driver's side door was open. The keys were still in the ignition, and a can of beer sat on the seat. Archer, however, was nowhere to be seen. Earl and Butoric didn't think much of Archer's absence at first. It wasn't unusual for him to stop along the road, whether to scout for timber, urinate, or just take a break. Assuming Archer would return shortly, they continued on their way. They stopped at the bank, withdrew the $50, and left the money in an envelope on the gate of Archer's house. The hours passed, and Archer never appeared. Earl and Butoric grew more concerned. They began driving to and from various locations, hoping to spot Archer or his truck. When they returned to Archer's house and saw the envelope still sitting untouched on the gate, their worry deepened. Earl left Butoric along Garrett Creek Road to watch for Archer while he went into town to refuel the car. Upon his return, Butoric had no news. She hadn't seen Archer either. As the day stretched into evening, Earl and Butoric decided to drive back toward Oakville Hill to check on Archer's truck. To their unease, it was still parked in the same spot, abandoned and untouched. They honked the horn and called for Archer, but there was no response. Finally, Earl decided to drive the truck back to Archer's house himself, with Butoric following behind in their car. Once Archer's wife, who had been married to him for only a month, returned home from work at 7:15 p.m., they told her what had happened and reported Archer missing to the authorities. Police were brought to the spot on Oakville Hill where Archer's truck had been left. A thorough search of the surrounding area was launched, involving tracking dogs and search teams, but Archer was nowhere to be found. The only potential clue was a bandana believed to belong to Archer, discovered along the road. The search dogs briefly picked up a scent about a quarter-mile away from the truck's location, but the trail went cold shortly afterward. Investigators were left with no clear direction or evidence to indicate what had happened to Archer. As the investigation unfolded, witness testimony and statements raised further questions. One witness claimed to have seen Earl driving along Brooklyn Road on the west side of Oakville Hill between 1 o'clock and 2 p.m., contradicting Earl's claim that he was elsewhere at the time. The same witness also noted that Archer's truck was not parked on Oakville Hill between 5 o'clock and 6 p.m., even though Earl and Butoric said it had been there consistently. On April 11th, 10 days after Archer disappeared, Earl and Butoric requested to restate their account of the day's events. They expressed fears for their safety and suggested Archer might have been mistaken for someone else that someone wanted. However, they refused to elaborate on this cryptic statement, leaving investigators puzzled. One notable detail was the discovery of tire tracks near the truck's location. Earl initially stated Archer had mentioned planning to go to that spot to look for firewood, but he later denied ever saying this. The inconsistencies in their statements left investigators questioning the full truth of what happened that day. While neither Earl nor Butoric are officially considered suspects, Archer's family has heard troubling rumors over the years. Some believe Archer was murdered, and his body hidden in a well or buried beneath the roots of a fallen tree. These dark theories have only added to the pain felt by his loved ones, who are desperate for answers. Adding to the mystery is Archer's reputation as a resourceful and experienced woodsman. His skills made it unlikely he would have simply gotten lost in the area. The sudden abandonment of his truck, coupled with the odd placement of his belongings, suggests foul play may have been involved. Archer's daughter and granddaughter have spent years seeking the truth about what happened to him that April day. The rumors of murder and the inconsistencies in Earl and Butoric's accounts are more than just whispers. They are troubling signs that Archer's disappearance was not accidental. Despite exhaustive searches, police efforts, and the family's determination, Archer Johnson's case remains unsolved. Brock Holmes was just 22 years old when he vanished without a trace in Sultan, Washington, leaving behind a mystery that has haunted his family and the small community ever since. On October 7, 2009, Brock spent the evening with friends. They started the night at Bubba's Roadhouse Bar and Grill, shooting pool and enjoying themselves. Afterward, the group headed to the Dutch Cup restaurant, a local hangout spot. At some point during the evening, Brock used his cell phone for the last time at around 6:30 p.m. The night wore on, and Brock ended up at a friend's house in the 24700 block of Florence Acres Road. Witnesses later said he left the residence around midnight, intending to walk home to his house on Old Owen Road. A distance of 3 to 4 miles, some friends had reportedly offered him a ride, but for reasons still unclear, that ride never materialized. It was a dark, late autumn night, and Brock had been drinking earlier in the evening. He was carrying several personal belongings, including his cell phone, an iPod, a pool stick, and some cash. But when he failed to arrive home, none of those items were ever recovered. Despite extensive searches along his presumed route, there were no signs of Brock, no dropped phone, no wallet, no footprints. He seemed to have simply disappeared into thin air. Brock's mother, with whom he had been living since May of that year, reported him missing shortly after it became clear he hadn't come home. She described him as a happy, grounded young man who enjoyed his job at the local Chevron gas station on U.S. Highway 2 and was excited about getting his driver's license. Brock had moved to Sultan earlier that year to live with his mother and teenage sister, leaving behind his father's home in Skagit, Washington, where he had spent most of his high school years. For months, Brock's family and local authorities searched for answers. Theories ranged from an accidental fall while walking home to foul play. Given the terrain of the area, which includes wooded sections and water hazards, it was possible that Brock, disoriented from drinking, might have suffered an accident. However, without any physical evidence, the truth remains elusive. Brock's mother believes her son is no longer alive. The idea that he would simply walk away from his life doesn't align with the young man she knew, a person who was content, close to his family, and planning for his future. The story of Julianne Jett's disappearance in 1985 is one of mystery, heartbreak, and lingering suspicion. At 36 years old, Julianne was newly married and had just moved into a rented home with her husband, Ian Jett, in Bellevue's Lake Hills neighborhood. She had an 11-year-old daughter from a previous relationship who was living with her grandparents at the time. Despite this arrangement, Julianne maintained a close bond with her daughter. The two spent their last day together shopping in Bellevue and enjoying pizza at Julianne's home, leaving the young girl with fond memories of a seemingly happy mother. Julianne's family painted a picture of a woman who was full of life and focused on her future. In conversations leading up to her disappearance, Julianne spoke excitedly about furnishing and decorating her new home. There were no signs that she was planning to leave her life behind, which made her sudden and unexplained disappearance all the more baffling. Seen on June 1st, 1985. According to Ian, the couple got into an argument that day, and Julianne announced that she was leaving. Ian claimed that when he returned home later, Julianne was gone, along with a suitcase and a few personal belongings. He did not report her missing. Instead, it was her parents who filed the missing persons report on June 18th, more than 2 weeks after she vanished. Ian's lack of urgency in reporting her disappearance immediately raised questions among Julianne's family. Why would a husband wait so long to take action if his wife had truly left under mysterious circumstances? Weeks after Julianne disappeared, her purse, wallet, and other belongings turned up in an unexpected location: the lobby of the MGM Grand Hotel in Reno, Nevada. These items were mailed to the home where Julianne's daughter was staying, accompanied by a note from a hotel employee who claimed Julianne had left them behind. Despite this strange clue, there was no evidence that Julianne had ever been at the MGM Grand. Hotel records showed no sign of her checking in or out, and security cameras did not capture her image. The discovery of her belongings only deepened the mystery. Was Julianne actually in Reno, or was this an attempt by someone else to create a false trail? Over the years, suspicion has increasingly fallen on Ian. Julianne's family, particularly her daughter, believe he may have been involved in her disappearance. One chilling moment came years after Julianne went missing when her daughter confronted Ian. She accused him of being the reason her mother was gone, and his response was unsettling. Without denying her accusation, Ian reportedly replied, "I know." He offered no further explanation. Since 1985, Ian has remarried 4 times and moved at least a dozen times, behavior that some interpret as a sign he may have been trying to distance himself from the case. His actions immediately following Julianne's disappearance have also raised eyebrows. If Ian believed Julianne had truly left on her own, why didn't he report her missing? And if he thought she might be in danger, why didn't he alert authorities right away? Julianne's daughter is adamant that her mother did not leave of her own accord. She believes Julianne was murdered, and the crime likely occurred inside the home she shared with Ian. Several details support this theory. 1. Strong family ties. Julianne was devoted to her daughter. It is unlikely she would have left without maintaining contact, especially since their relationship was so close. 2. Future plans. Julianne had recently moved into her new home and was excited about decorating and settling in. This enthusiasm contradicts any notion that she was planning to disappear. 3. The Reno deception. The discovery of Julianne's belongings in Reno seems more like an attempt to mislead investigators than evidence of her actual movements. Julianne's case is riddled with questions that remain unanswered to this day. What really happened on June 1st, 1985? Ian's account is the only version of events, and it leaves many gaps. Did Julianne truly leave after an argument, or did something far more sinister occur? Who left her belongings in Reno? The presence of Julianne's wallet and purse at the MGM Grand is a tantalizing clue, but the lack of evidence placing her there raises doubts about whether she ever traveled to Nevada. Why did Ian respond the way he did? His cryptic admission, "I know," when accused of being responsible for Julianne's disappearance, has haunted her daughter for years. Was this a confession or an acknowledgement of guilt? Despite the passage of nearly 4 decades, Julianne's family has never stopped searching for answers. Her daughter has spent years piecing together what little information exists, refusing to give up hope that the truth will one day come to light. Daryl Kemp's disappearance in January 2007 remains a perplexing and controversial mystery, blending elements of financial scandal, personal fear, and the unknown. On the evening of January 28, 2007, Kemp was last seen leaving North Cove, Washington, in his blue Plymouth Voyager van, heading towards his home in Graham, Washington. He never made it back. When he didn't arrive home, his family reported him missing the following day. On the afternoon of January 29th, the same day his disappearance was officially reported, authorities discovered Kemp's van in a remote location. It had run off the road along State Route 105, just north of the Shoalwater Indian Reservation in North Cove. The van was overturned, lying on its roof near a remote beach. Oddly, there were no signs that anyone had been injured in the crash or that Kemp had been at the scene. A belt, however, was found tied to the steering wheel, raising unsettling questions. Search dogs picked up a scent trail along the road above the crash site, but it was faint and disappeared quickly, offering little insight into Kemp's fate. It was as if he had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only questions and a series of baffling clues. As the search for Kemp continued, his family received a chilling letter a few days after his disappearance. According to the letter, Kemp had given it to a friend from his Army days with instructions to mail it if he ever disappeared. The contents painted a grim picture. Kemp's business, Triad Marketing, was in deep financial trouble. He had borrowed significant sums from loan sharks, and when he couldn't repay them, he feared for his life. The letter suggested that if his family was reading it, he was likely already deceased. This revelation brought Kemp's financial woes into sharp focus. He had borrowed hundreds of thousands of dollars to keep his used car business afloat, and reports indicated he may have been up to $3 million in debt. After his disappearance, many of the cars from his lot vanished, leading investigators to delve deeper into his dealings. In May 2007, the State Department of Licensing made a shocking announcement. They had evidence that Kemp had been involved in an elaborate scheme to defraud people. The alleged fraud involved taking cars on consignment, using their titles to secure loans from finance companies, and then selling the vehicles to third parties without repaying the loans or returning the funds to the original owners. This left a trail of angry customers and significant financial damage. Authorities believed Kemp's disappearance might be linked to his fraudulent activities and mounting debts. The letter painted him as a desperate man on the run, but was it genuine? Could it have been a carefully orchestrated cover-up? Speculation about Kemp's fate took several directions. Some believe he staged his disappearance to escape his financial troubles, possibly fleeing to Bolivia, where he was born and raised by missionary parents. South America, with its connections to his past, seemed like a plausible hiding place. This theory suggests that Kemp may have planned everything: the staged accident, the letter, and his disappearance. Others, however, aren't so sure. Could he have fallen victim to the very loan sharks he feared? The crash cites strange details, like the belt tied to the steering wheel and the absence of any clear signs of injury. Daryl Kemp's case remains open. On the evening of November 11, 1995, Carolyn Kibby was last seen at Omar's Restaurant and Steakhouse, located in the 10400 block of Northeast 4th Plain Road in Orchards, Washington. She had gone there for the evening, but what was supposed to be a normal night out turned into a baffling mystery that remains unsolved to this day. Carolyn was in the company of Dennis Keith Smith, a man she had just met that night. According to Smith, Carolyn was heavily intoxicated, something that was corroborated by other witnesses at the restaurant, and he claimed he was helping her get to her car. Smith later told the police a strange and unsettling story. He claimed that as he was assisting Carolyn in the parking lot, a stranger approached them. This man allegedly yelled at them and called Carolyn an insulting name. Smith stated that he didn't stick around to see what would happen next. He left immediately and drove away in his own vehicle. What happened to Carolyn after that is unknown. That night, just before midnight, 2 witnesses called 911 to report hearing a woman screaming for help from a nearby field. But by the time authorities arrived, there was no sign of Carolyn or any evidence to indicate what had happened. She seemed to have vanished into thin air. Days passed before Carolyn was officially reported missing. When police investigated, they found her 1991 Toyota Camry still parked in the restaurant's parking lot. There were no signs of forced entry or struggle around the car. Inside, they found a handwritten note suggesting plans to fly from Portland to Los Angeles, which struck investigators as odd. Carolyn's purse was missing and was never recovered. Her husband was adamant that it was completely out of character for her to leave without telling anyone, further deepening the mystery. The investigation quickly focused on Dennis Keith Smith, who had a troubling past. A photo of him circulated with news reports, and his criminal record raised eyebrows. Smith had been in and out of the system since he was just 9 years old. More chillingly, at the time of Carolyn's disappearance, he was on parole for a previous murder conviction. In 1982, he had strangled his sister to death. Her body was discovered a week after she went missing, and Smith was given a life sentence. However, he served only 10 years before being released on parole. From the beginning, authorities were skeptical of Smith's story about what happened the night Carolyn disappeared. When they tried to bring him in for further questioning, they discovered he had fled the state. In July 1996, a warrant was issued for his arrest, charging him with Carolyn's murder. Smith evaded capture for several months. Finally, in September 1996, law enforcement tracked him down in Florida. His apprehension was dramatic. He was shot during a confrontation with police and critically injured. After recovering from his injuries, he was extradited back to Washington to stand trial. Once in custody, Smith's story changed. He now claimed that he and Carolyn had consensual sex in his pickup truck in the restaurant's parking lot. He painted a new picture that night. He said an unknown man approached the truck, hit him with a stick, then dragged Carolyn out by her hair and left with her. He even accused Carolyn's husband of being the mysterious attacker. Despite Smith's changing narratives, the evidence mounted against him. Blood matching Carolyn's DNA was found in his truck. His defense team argued that the blood was consistent with his story of consensual sex, trying to cast doubt on the prosecution's version of events. They also floated the theory that Carolyn's husband was the real killer, or that Carolyn might still be alive. The jury wasn't convinced. They convicted Smith of aggravated murder, determining that he had killed Carolyn to cover up the crimes of rape and kidnapping. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In 2001, however, an appellate court reduced his sentence to 70 years. The court ruled there wasn't enough evidence to prove the rape and kidnapping charges. Still, Smith remained behind bars, also serving a 99-year sentence for his sister's murder. His earliest possible parole date was more than a century away. In 2004, Smith made a shocking admission. He confessed to killing Carolyn. He even attempted to help authorities locate her body, claiming it was buried on Larch Mountain. Unfortunately, a thorough search of the area turned up nothing. Later that year, Smith died by suicide in prison, taking any remaining secrets to his grave. Carolyn Kibby was declared legally dead in 1997. Her family eventually received a $2.8 million settlement from the state of Washington. They had argued that Smith was inadequately supervised after his parole, and that better oversight might have prevented Carolyn's tragic fate. To this day, Carolyn's body has never been found. While her family has some measure of closure, the full truth of what happened on that fateful night in 1995 remains a mystery. Jeffrey Kungis vanished under mysterious circumstances on March 2, 1996, the same day his mother, Susan Kungis, was brutally murdered in their Bonnie Lake, Washington home. Susan had been beaten to death with a blunt object while sitting in her living room, and her body was later found in her bedroom. The scene suggested she either crawled there or was dragged after the fatal attack. Ron Kungis, Jeffrey's father, returned home from work around 4:30 p.m. to an unsettling scene. The door was unlocked, the television was on, and he couldn't open the bedroom door. Hours later, around 6:30 p.m., he forced it open and discovered Susan's lifeless body slumped against it. Along with the horror of her murder, Ron realized something else. Jeffrey was missing. The boy had last spoken to his father by phone at 9:30 that morning and had not been seen since. In addition to Susan's death and Jeffrey's disappearance, Ron's gold Seiko watch and about $700 in cash were missing from the home. Investigators believe the watch might hold a clue to the identity of the killer. Marty Malcolm, a 41-year-old handyman, quickly emerged as a key figure in the case. He had discovered Susan's body and initially claimed he panicked, stole her maroon Toyota Camry, and fled. The car was found abandoned early the next morning at a convenience store in Auburn, Washington. Malcolm later turned himself into the police and admitted to withdrawing $300 from Susan's bank account that day, money he claimed to have lost gambling. Though charged only with possession of stolen property and sentenced to 45 days in jail, Malcolm's story raised significant suspicions. Prior conviction. He had a history of violence, having been convicted of second-degree murder in 1980 for killing his estranged wife. Released from prison in 1992, he was living in the area and often spent time at the Kungis home. Inconsistent accounts. Malcolm claimed he had taken Jeffrey for a haircut around 11:30 a.m. Surveillance footage from a nearby ATM showed him using Susan's car, and a witness reported seeing a young person inside. Malcolm insisted he returned Jeffrey home around 12:30 p.m. and found Susan's body when he came back later. Despite these inconsistencies and his refusal to take a lie detector test, Malcolm was never charged with Susan's murder or Jeffrey's disappearance. The Kungis household had its share of tensions. Ron and Susan's 15-year marriage had been rocky, with a prior separation. Their frequent arguments distressed Jeffrey, who reportedly had anger issues, even damaging his bedroom door. However, he had been improving academically at his private school, and his father described him as a shy but normal teenager. Investigators ruled out the possibility of Jeffrey running away. He wasn't accustomed to being on his own, and authorities believed he would have contacted someone if he had left voluntarily. Engraved with his name and a message commemorating his service with Boeing, the Seiko watch disappeared on the day of the murder. Police suspect it may have been sold and could link the killer to the crime. Extensive searches of the Bonnie Lake area yielded few clues. His love for the game Magic. The gathering was noted, but there was no evidence suggesting he ran away or was involved in his mother's death. Authorities strongly suspect foul play in Jeffrey's disappearance. Malcolm's criminal history and suspicious behavior make him the leading suspect. Yet, with no physical evidence directly linking him to the murder or abduction, and without Jeffrey's body, the case remains open.